Spec Ops: The Line is a third-person military shooter where you play as Captain Martin Walker as you and your two squad mates go through the buried city of Dubai looking for American survivors. At first glance, this seems like a boring cookie-cutter shooting game, but really there's more to it than that. Visually, Spec Ops was kind of surprising. You first start out in the desert landscapes where it's brown and boring and not much to it, but eventually you'll start to travel into these hotels and other buildings in the city that have different lighting and a whole different color palette than the desert, and it's a nice change of pace that you didn't really expect when you first started up the game. The characters look pretty good too, both their faces and up-close cutscenes, and their entire outfit when they're walking around. Overall, the gameplay of Spec Ops: The Line is solid. The developers seem to have made sure the gameplay was gripping early on in the game, while the player waits for the story to pick up, which it certainly does. Immediately when the game starts, the player takes the role of a helicopter gunner given the task of shooting down enemy choppers. The action doesn't dial down often, as later gameplay sections are given the backdrop of hair metal music while the game goes into slow motion with each headshot. Enemies that are down but not out can be finished off with an execution a la Gears of War. These executions are not necessary to the game, but it is interesting that they get more violent as the character changes throughout the story. The level design complements the gunplay. Spec Ops is very cover-based, and the areas for taking cover are laid out well enough to make each combat scenario similar to a puzzle when it comes to finding the most efficient strategy to take out your foes. However, the controls are pretty clunky at times, especially when it comes to the character movement and moving in and out of cover. There were times when the transition from running to crouching behind cover was not as smooth as I wanted it to be. Sometimes I would end up taking extra damage or dying as my character would stand with his head out in the open as I was mashing the cover button furiously, but had to wait for the slight but crucial input delay to end. Once I finally would successfully get behind a wall, it was fun to scope out any potential unconventional killing methods available. For example, some areas would have snipers standing on rooftops where you could shoot the floor out from beneath them to send them falling to their death. Other times, sand would pile up behind a wall that enemies were standing next to. One option would be to kill the enemies with bullets. The better option would be to shoot the wall until it breaks to let the sand fall through and crush them. Your squad AI is actually useful as well, which is sadly uncommon in shooters. They will regularly kill enemies on their own, or you can give them specific targets. Highlight a machine gunner behind cover to have your buddy lob a grenade in that direction, or point out a sniper in the distance to have your long-range specialist pick him off. You also have a good variety of weapons at your own disposal. They each fall into their own roles too, as shotguns won't touch an enemy from distance, but when fighting in tight spaces, there is no better option. While it may take a few deaths to realize that charging through the battlefield while hip-firing a Tommy gun is not the most viable technique, that's okay because Spec Ops is forgiving, as each death grants you a little extra ammo to help you get the job done on your next try. So while the gameplay of Spec Ops: The Line is pretty good, the story is the meat and potatoes and what you really buy and play the game for. I don't think I can go into it too much just to avoid spoilers, but just as a general summary of it, it sure is a mind trip. Nothing good really ever happens for your characters, and it's not a chore to go through the story because you have some interesting characters and some pretty good voice actors too. The whole time you're playing, you want to finish the game to find out what really is happening in this city. But even when you do finally finish it, you probably still won't know what's going on. It's kind of confusing, but it's nice how it makes you think. In conclusion, Spec Ops: The Line is a solid third-person shooter. I didn't get to try the multiplayer or the online co-op because either the online community is dead or I just couldn't find a match at the time. But really, you don't buy this game for the multiplayer or co-op. It's more for the story. And that is a story you won't forget for a while. It'll have you saying WTF the whole time, either by disgust or because you're having your mind blown. Spec Ops: The Line gets a 4 out of 5.